The rope was already tight around her neck when he stumbled into Bitter Creek. Marlo Thorne, 23 years old, seamstress, orphan, stood trembling on a wooden platform in the town square. Her hands were tied behind her back, her face streaked with tears and dust. The noose scratched against her pale skin as Judge Harrison Blackwood read out her sentence to the 40 or so townspeople gathered below. Some were curious, some looked away, and some just seemed eager to watch someone die. She was set to hang in 10 minutes for a crime she didn't commit. The judge's voice echoed through the square, booming with authority. He said Marlo had stolen his wife's emerald necklace, a piece so valuable most folks in Bitter Creek would never see anything like it in their lifetime. Marlo had been working late that night, hemming a dress in Mrs. Blackwood's parlor. When the necklace went missing, she was the only one in the house. But Marlo knew the truth. She'd seen Mrs. Blackwood sneak outside that same night, watched through the window as she buried the necklace in the garden behind their home. But who would believe her? Just a poor girl with no family, no voice. Certainly not against the judge's wife. The crowd murmured, some nervously, others with morbid curiosity. This was the first public hanging Bitter Creek had seen in 3 years. And Judge Blackwood? He was putting on a show. Marlo's knees shook as the executioner tested the trapdoor beneath her. His name was Garrett Walsh, thin, quiet, and the creaking wood only made her heart pound harder. She closed her eyes, tried to pray, but no words would come. She'd never hurt anyone, never even stolen a penny. Since she was 14, she'd worked 16-hour days sewing clothes just to afford a room above a 4. Then the judge pulled out his pocket watch. He locked eyes with Marlo for a brief moment. Cold, gray eyes, and what she saw there made her stomach turn. Satisfaction. He was enjoying this. He snapped his watch shut and gave Garrett a nod. That's when it happened. The sound of spurs, slow, deliberate, clanked up the wooden steps behind the platform. All eyes turned, and there he was, a stranger, a drunk cowboy by the looks of him. Dusty boots, whiskey breath, and a long brown duster covered in trail grime. He looked like trouble, or at least like someone who'd wandered into the wrong town at the worst possible time. But this man, he was about to change everything. Caleb Iron Creek Mackenzie, his boots thudded against the wood with an uneven rhythm. From a glance, he looked like any other drifter, but his bloodshot eyes scanned the scene with razor sharpness. The townsfolk's uneasy expressions, the tension in the judge's hand as it hovered near his gun, and the panic on Marlo's face. He knew something was off. Judge Blackwood turned toward him, face flushed with irritation. "This is a legal proceeding," he barked. "Move along, cowboy, or I'll have you arrested for disturbing the peace." Caleb swayed a bit but didn't back down. "Legal?" he slurred. "You call this legal?" He gestured toward Marlo. "You're about to hang a girl who looks like she wouldn't hurt a fly. What'd she do? Kill the whole town?" People shifted uneasily. Some whispered, a few nodded. Caleb was drunk, sure, but he was saying things some of them had quietly wondered. The judge growled, "She's a thief. She stole from my wife, and the law is clear." Caleb laughed bitterly. "Your wife, huh? So the judge, the jury, and the victim all live under the same roof?" Marlo's eyes widened. No one, not a soul, had spoken up for her during the trial. And now a stranger, clearly half drunk, was standing up to the most powerful man in town. That's when Caleb reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something that silenced the entire square. A badge, tarnished and dented, but unmistakable. Deputy U.S. Marshal. You could hear a pin drop. The judge's face went from red to ghostly pale in seconds. His hand, still hovering over his gun, began to tremble. Caleb slipped the badge back into his coat, but the damage was done. The weight of that single gesture hung in the air like a storm cloud. "Well, Judge," Caleb said, his slurred voice taking on a sharper edge, "you were saying something about the law being clear?" For the first time in days, Marlo felt the faintest flicker of hope. A federal marshal. Here, now. Maybe she wasn't going to die after all, but Judge Blackwood recovered fast. Years of corruption had taught him how to mask fear. "Marshal or not," he snapped, "you have no jurisdiction here. This is a local matter, tried in a local court." Caleb tilted his head, swaying slightly. "All right then, tell me about this so-called trial. How long did it last? Who represented the girl? What kind of evidence did you show?" The judge clenched his jaw. She was the only one in the house. The necklace was missing. That's all the proof we needed. Caleb raised his voice. You find it on her? In her things? No. But nothing, Caleb interrupted, stepping closer. Despite the booze on his breath, there was something steady and dangerous in his movements now. You're hanging a girl based on nothing but suspicion. That's not justice, that's convenience. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Patterson, the schoolteacher, leaned over and whispered to her husband. Old Tom Fletcher scratched his head. Even Sheriff Morrison, who'd been silent until now, looked uncomfortable. Judge Blackwood's grip on the situation was slipping. Caleb kept pushing. Where's the necklace now? Did anyone search for it? Did anyone even try to look for the truth? Or did you just decide she was guilty because it was easier that way? Marlowe watched in stunned silence. Every question Caleb asked was something her court-appointed lawyer should have brought up, but he hadn't. Her trial had lasted 10 minutes. No questions, no defense, just the judge's word. Now that word was being torn apart in front of the whole town. Judge Blackwood tried to hold the line. The evidence is clear enough for me. Caleb scoffed. I've seen more evidence at a church pie contest. Then his voice dropped low. Let me ask you again. Where's the necklace? The crowd leaned in, waiting. Caleb reached into his saddlebag. What he pulled out made Judge Blackwood step back like he'd seen a ghost. Held high above Caleb's head was the emerald necklace. It caught the sunlight, flashing green fire across the square. It was unmistakable, the same necklace Mrs. Blackwood had described in court, the same one that had supposedly vanished. Caleb's voice rang out. Found this buried in the judge's garden, wrapped in a piece of fancy silk from his wife's dress. Gasps, outcries. The crowd erupted in murmurs. The schoolteacher covered her mouth. Samuel Muller looked furious. A few women recognized the silk pattern immediately. It came from one of Mrs. Blackwood's best gowns. Marlowe almost collapsed in relief. She'd been telling the truth the whole time. Judge Blackwood's face turned pale. That's impossible. You're lying. Am I? Caleb stared him down. Your wife said it was stolen from her jewelry box, but I found it buried in your own backyard. He held up the scrap of silk for everyone to see, wrapped in this. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, voice trembling. Judge, Marlowe came to me that night. She was scared, said she saw something strange. Samuel Muller nodded. She told me the same thing. It was all coming apart now. Years of unquestioned authority were unraveling in real time. Judge Blackwood's voice cracked as he yelled, This man's lying. He's working with her. Caleb didn't flinch. I rode into this town 20 minutes ago. Never seen her before in my life, but I've seen men like you before. Sheriff Morrison finally spoke up. Judge, if the necklace was found in your yard, it wasn't, the judge shouted, but his voice was cracking now. Then Caleb stepped up to the platform. He began untying Marlowe's wrists. The judge panicked. He drew his gun, pointing it straight at Caleb's chest. The square went dead silent. Even the children watching from the windows froze. And then Caleb said something that turned everything on its head. I came here for you, Harrison Blackwood. Caleb's voice wasn't slurred anymore. It was clear, steady, cold as ice. He turned slowly to face the judge, ignoring the pistol pointed at his chest. 3 years I've been tracking you. 3 years since you disappeared from Carson City with $50,000 of territorial funds. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through dry grass. The judge's hand twitched. You're insane, Blackwood snapped. I've been serving this town for 5 years. Caleb nodded. Yep, 5 years under a stolen name, but your real name is Henry Blackstone, former treasurer of the Nevada Territory. Marlowe could barely process what she was hearing. Just moments ago, she was seconds from death. Now, she was part of a standoff that had peeled back the truth about the man who almost killed her. Mrs. Patterson's voice rang out again, shaky but determined. Is this true? Have we been living under the authority of a criminal? The judge's gun was still pointed, but his hand was shaking. Bad. Caleb didn't move. I told you I've never met this girl before, but when I saw a public hanging based on a lie, I figured this was where my search ended. Sheriff Morrison stepped forward, gun drawn. Judge, you need to lower your weapon and answer these accusations. I am the law in this town, Blackwood roared, eyes wild. I decide who lives and who dies. That's when the crowd started moving. Tom Fletcher, Samuel Muller, Mrs. Patterson, others, they climbed the steps toward the platform surrounding the judge. He was outnumbered, outgunned, cornered. Then, like a ghost out of a nightmare, Mrs. Blackwood appeared, running through the square, hair flying, blue dress billowing behind her, face streaked with tears. "Harrison, stop!" she screamed. "She knows about Rebecca." Silence. Everyone froze, even Judge Blackwood. Caleb narrowed his eyes. "Who's Rebecca?" Mrs. Blackwood sobbed. "His first wife, in Carson City. He told everyone here he was a widower, but Rebecca is still alive." The crowd gasped again. Bigamy, fraud, lies stacked on lies. Marlowe found her voice. "I saw letters," she said quietly, then louder. "When I worked in your parlor, Mrs. Blackwood, I saw letters signed, your loving wife, Rebecca. You saw me reading them." Mrs. Blackwood nodded, ashamed. "I knew you'd figure it out. Harrison told me we had to get rid of you. He said we should frame you. I went along with it, but I can't do it anymore." The judge's gun dropped to his side, the fight finally draining from his body. Sheriff Morrison stepped forward and took it from his hand. Caleb removed the noose from Marlowe's neck, cut the ropes from her wrists. She collapsed, sobbing, free at last. "Thank you," she whispered. "How'd you know to check the garden?" she asked, voice still shaky. Caleb helped her to her feet. "I didn't," he said with a shrug. "But when I saw Mrs. Blackwood watching the hanging from her window, looking guilty as sin, well, lucky guess." The crowd began to disperse. People muttered about corruption, betrayal, and the years they'd trusted a man who was nothing more than a con in a robe. Sheriff Morrison took both Blackwoods into custody. Mrs. Blackwood went willingly. Judge Blackwood didn't speak another word. But Caleb's work wasn't done. Later that day, he and the sheriff searched Blackwood's house. What they found confirmed everyone's worst fears. A criminal empire hiding behind courtroom walls. Fake land deeds, stolen cattle brands, bribes, outlaw correspondence, a journal detailing every crooked case, 30 names at least, most of them innocent. Caleb's hands trembled as he read. "The Hernandez family," he whispered. "They were hanged, the mother and kids sold off." Morrison just shook his head. "God help us." Meanwhile, Marlowe sat quietly at the general store, still in the dress she'd almost died in, sipping coffee with shaking hands. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up," she told Mrs. Mueller. "Back in that cell, waiting to die." But she didn't, and she wouldn't. When Caleb came back from the judge's house, he found her sitting on the porch. "I owe you everything," she said. Caleb shook his head. "I should have found him sooner." "You saved me, and now you can save the others," she said softly. Caleb nodded. The weight of the others he hadn't saved would never fully leave him. But now, at least, justice had a fighting chance. 3 hours later, Judge Blackwood confessed to everything. Every lie, every bribe, every life he ruined. By then, the gallows had already been torn down. They burned the wood that night in a bonfire that lit the prairie for miles, a fire fueled by the end of an era. A symbol that justice, not fear, would rule Bitter Creek from now on.